afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us, a podcast called Because It's There. And I'm your host, Saray Khumalo. This podcast is about, life. George Mallory was asked, a mountaineer, was asked in the 50s, why do you climb Everest? And he said, because it's there. Why be a leader? Because it's there within us, because in spite everything else that's going around us, that's going on around us, the pandemic, the insecurities, what happened yesterday, we are all amazing leaders. We're all extraordinary beings. And with us today is none other than Cindy Van Wyk, who's an amazing leader herself, a friend and a sister from another mother. She's here to tell us about her life and her book, which I've read, which is called Life is Not Paint by Numbers. I can't wait for you to hear snippets of Cindy's life and learning from her journey, her amazing journey, I must add. And today is her birthday. So happy birthday, Cindy, and welcome to Because It's There.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you for the birthday wishes. Always a wonderful privilege and honor to speak to you and to be able to share just a little bit of my slice of life with your audience. And I'm just looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. And before we go into the main conversation, I want to start with a little bit of an icebreaker. So I am a survivor because?
Oh, I am a survivor because of many things. I am a survivor, first and foremost, because of my faith. I am a survivor because I'm resilient. I am a survivor because I refuse to give up. I am a survivor because impossible is a word that you will find in the dictionary, but is a word that somehow is not part of my vocabulary. And I am a survivor because I have an amazing tribe, an amazing group of friends like yourself, my family, that has been with me, walked with me, talked with me, cried with me, celebrated successes, raised eyebrows at wacky ideas. And, that is just such a blessing. I think if you take all of this and you add all of this together, then how can you not be a survivor?
How can you not? Indeed. I love that. Absolutely love that. And I can attest to it as somebody that's been with you through some of those curveballs that have come our way, and we've managed to get up and keep going. Anyway, let's go back to Cindy and the book. I mean, when I read this book, a lot of what I've gone through with you made so much more sense. Life is not paint by numbers. A riveting tale of a train driver's daughter, a redhead, an adopted child, a loved daughter, an attorney, an artist, a filmmaker, a philanthropist, a Guinness World Record holder, and I'm not even done, an author, and much more. Tell us a little bit about who is Cindy Van Beek.
Well, I think, Sarah, let's start with the title of the book before we get to who is Cindy. I was grappling with a title name, and I was looking back in my life in corporate and going all the way back to school, even my studies at varsity. And I went and had a look at what society sometimes wants to dictate to us, and what corporate wants to dictate to us, that we must live a safe life. We must follow a template. And if we follow the recipe, we're going to be good. And I had a look at this, and I had a good, long, hard think about this. And I said, no, life is not paint by numbers. Life, when you are born, irrespective of your circumstances, and I'll chat a bit on that because I think that is really what shaped me into who I am today. But life doesn't come with a recipe book. Life doesn't come with a template. Yes. So why do we want to template our lives? any paint by numbers kit, you've got an outline, and then you've got little numbers, and then it says, okay, 1 is yellow and 2 is blue and 3 is red, and you paint that and you'll get a picture. Now, my entire life, I've hated this concept of paint by numbers, and whenever as a child I was given something like this, I would purposefully not paint by numbers, because I wanted to create my view of what I think this image should be. And I think that is the essence of the book Life is Not Paint by Numbers, that we are all different.
Yeah.
We are born into different circumstances, and the circumstances shape us, our choices shape us, life shapes us, and we owe it to ourselves to be the best version of who we can be, not who the world says we need to be. We need to find that extraordinary essence within us. And we then take our own perfect masterpiece and we hang it on our wall of life. So if I can go back to who is Cindy, I had a very interesting life beginning. I was adopted at a very young age. I spent some time in an orphanage. And I speak about this individual in the book, The Train Driver. And many years later, when I was around about 26, I had this notion that I wanted to have a couple of questions answered around my roots. Although I was adopted into my family, and this is the only family that I have, I think at that point in time, I really needed some answers. And that made me realize that, yes, there is learned behavior or behavior that comes from your circumstances, but there is also an element of genetics. And I wanted to see, how do I map this? How do I paint this picture of me? How do I complete this picture? Yeah. And at that point in time, I was practicing law, so I had access to quicker routes to gather information, which normal members of society don't have. And we managed to trace down my biological mother, and we had to get approval because it was a closed adoption way back when. And she agreed to meet me. And she basically told me the story about how and why she gave me up for adoption. But the train driver, which was her husband at that point in time, always felt that I was not his child, and I wasn't his biological child. And he basically, in a nutshell, at every opportunity would, in those very, very, very early years, months of my life, would tell me that I would amount to nothing. And I think that, the mind retains information. It's like the hard drive of a computer. The minute that information is captured, it's there. And I think that is where my drive started, to say that I am not just going to be the product of my circumstances. I am going to rise above, irrespective of what life hands or handed me in the past. And so from those very, very humble beginnings in Pretoria, going into an orphanage, being adopted into a wonderful family, just really enforced that, I think, cellular blueprint that I had in my mind, that I will succeed, whatever success looks like for me at that point in time.
Absolutely. I like that. I think you and I have that in common. When people say you can't, you're like, no, I can. And I'll show you how. And I love that about you. And just going back to you tracing down your mother, you articulate that quite well in the book, and finding out who you are. Did that change your perspective in life? Or did it change how you see the world, how you conduct yourself? Or did it just stop the search and tick a few boxes for you?
Sarah, I think it's that and more. I was driven by what I needed to know, those tick boxes. I needed to have certain tick boxes ticked. Yeah. But there are always two sides to a story. So whereas it gave me the answers that I wanted or needed to close a chapter in my life, I also realized that I had inadvertently opened a wound in this woman who gave birth to me. And I think through her unselfish choice, she had to make a choice between me and her husband at that point in time. And she realized that if I were to stay in that environment, I would probably not have the opportunities that I had in my adopted family. So how did it change my perspective? I think after the first meeting, I only met her once, but when I left Pretoria, there was so much going through my mind. And I realized that, sometimes we judge people for choices that they make because we don't have all the facts. So there I made a decision that as far as I possibly can, because we as human beings are inadvertently very judgmental. Yes. Very easy to judge somebody. Yeah. And I took a vow there to myself and I said, as far as I can, I will not judge somebody. Number one, because it's not my place to judge, but number two, I won't formulate an opinion until I have all the facts. I think that is the biggest lesson that taught me, that sometimes, well, it taught me two lessons. Sometimes it's better to have sleeping dogs lie. But then if I go back and if I had left it, I don't think I would have gained the wisdom to say that, you know what, people are sometimes forced to make choices that we don't know about, that we are not privy to, and those choices shape a decision. And whatever that choice is and whatever that decision is, has consequences. Sometimes those consequences are positive, and sometimes those consequences are negative. Yeah. Absolutely. And that is the biggest lesson for me from that part of my journey.
Yeah, that is absolutely interesting. So I titled this, I know we want to talk about your book in a lot more detail to try and understand the snippets and some of the wisdom that lie, between these pages. But I titled the talk today, our conversation, Owning Your Story. I don't think your journey has been an easy one. I don't think everyone that's gone through that journey or even their own journey is always comfortable in owning their story. What does owning your story mean to you? And at what point on your journey did you decide, this is me? I'm going to be unapologetic about my journey. And you actually speak about it proudly, whether it's negative or positive.
Sarah, I think owning your journey is a decision that one has to make. And sometimes there's a myriad of factors that influence that decision to say, I own who I am, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think the turning point for me about really owning my story and being brave enough to be that explicit about my life story, came in 2019. I had a couple of projects that didn't come off, and you had just reached the South Pole at that point in time. And I sat back and I looked at this and I thought, here's my friend Sarah, who really owns her story. And he's unapologetic about her story. And I had a mini meltdown and I said, God, why is things just not moving? And, I didn't really receive an answer right there and then. But, as the sort of hours, the specific day went by, I realized it's because I am not owning my story. So coming back to answering your question, what does it mean to own my story? I think what it means for me, and it might be different for somebody else out there, but for me, owning my story is, number one, being comfortable with who I am. That me, Cindy, with all the scars on my body, all the wrong choices, all the good choices, everything that I've been through in my life has been part of the puzzle pieces that has shaped the picture that I am today. Now, if you look at a puzzle, and I want to use the analogy of a puzzle, you start with the four corners, and then you build, and then you move pieces around, and sometimes you get frustrated because the picture is not building as quickly as you want it. But at the end of the day, you put all of those pieces together and you have a picture. If one of those pieces are missing, you have an incomplete picture. And I think owning my story is looking at this puzzle and eventually, through lots of trials and tribulations, love and laughter, fitting all of those pieces in the place where they need to be. And have you ever tried to force a puzzle piece into a position where it shouldn't be? Yeah, and I think owning my story means that I stopped trying to force pieces into the story of my life where they shouldn't be.
Absolutely. I love that. I think it also comes with a level of acceptance and
yes.
Moving on effectively. Absolutely love that. Cindy, so you are many things. We talked about that a bit earlier. Mm-hmm. You know, you are an executive. You are a Christian first and foremost. You send me and many others, you know, motivational verses and quotes every morning. You are a cancer survivor, not once, but twice, you know, that I know of. Which of the Cindy's comes to play when? You know, when do we decide this is the survivor coming? And when do we decide, author, okay, executive now? Or do these things, you know, just come together at any time, at any point that Cindy is out there to play?
You know, Sarah, that's a very interesting question, because some days I think I confuse myself, because I think, okay, who am I today? Am I the executive? Am I the storyteller? Am I painting a picture? Am I making a movie? Am I leading a team? And what I've realized is that I can't compartmentalize each one of these facets or shades that I am. And I'm very blessed. I've tried that in my life. But I find that the minute I shut down the one shade of me for something else to just be the business executive, it's disastrous. If I'm just the creative person without the structure and the discipline of being in corporate, that's also disastrous. So I've learned to morph all of this together. So I can't say to you, when Cindy comes out to play, it's the executive, or it's the artist, or it's the survivor, because I think all of these, once again, in corporate, you've got to be streetwise to survive. And surviving cancer or surviving any traumatic experience changes the way you think about things. It allows you to step back and say, all right, this is what's confronting me, but there must be a different way, a different angle that I can use, that I've got it into solving this problem. So that's why I say I think I confuse myself, because in any given day, I'm a little bit of everything. Yeah. And I'm blessed in the corporate environment that I am right now. I'm given the latitude and the freedom to wear these multiple shades and hats. Some days one has to be a bit more corporate, and some days I'm allowed to be a little bit more free in terms of being creative. Yeah. So it's not a simple answer. I think there's a little bit of every part of me in everything that I do.
Absolutely. I pick that up even on a hike that, okay, now we going corporate now. And we're going logical. And what's happening? Let's have a project plan. I'm like, okay,
Yes,
the executive has come to play. So Cindy, one of the
make
things,
me laugh.
yeah, one of the things that actually surprised me about you is the artist side of you. Where does this come from? Is this something that you grew into, or you grew up as an artist? And if so, what kind of an artist are you naturally?
Sarah, I think once again, there is some genetics at play, because some of the questions that I did ask my biological mother, Lillian, was, I said to her, I have got all of these creative tendencies, does it run in the family? And she said, yes, there is. So, okay. So I'm not being crazy. It does run somewhere in the genes. And my mom is very creative.
Yeah.
And she's turning 85 one of these days, and her mind is as sharp as anything. And she was a dancer, a writer, a musician,
Yeah.
and she just loved the arts.
Yes.
So from an early, so having that sort of in the genes, in at cellular level, and then coming into a home where that was encouraged,
Yes.
really shaped my world, my kaleidoscope of imagination. And it's actually so funny. I had a client many years ago, one of the fast food outlets, and one of the senior managers would say to me, Cindy, it's fascinating to watch you in a meeting. I said to her, why? She said to me, because if you get bored, if this is now not grabbing your attention anymore, you zone out. You're there and you're participating in the conversation, but I can see you've zoned out into some imaginary world. And I said to her, oh my word, is it that obvious? Because I used to do that at school as well. If you are not grabbing my attention or my imagination, I would zone out. So yeah, so it's in the genes and in the family that my mom really supported and encouraged that.
Yes.
When I was a little girl, my left and my right brain are balanced. So I can swing, as you've seen, from, okay, what are we going to do now? Blah, blah, blah. What's the plan? What's the plan of action? But have we thought about this too? And forget about the plan. Let's just wing this. Let's just go on this adventure and let's see and we'll make it up as we go. Now, that in itself can be confusing, because I'll go from a plan, from a structure, to going, oh, bugger the plan. Let's just embrace this adventure and go.
Absolutely. I can attest to that. Let's just go and spin for 8 hours and break the Guinness Book of Records. Why not? So Cindy, I find it fascinating, especially for somebody that's run your own business as an attorney, gone into corporate with all the corporate politics, moved into the artistic world. How important is it as an executive, especially for young executives, to be authentic, to bring the diversity of who you are within the corporate world? And the reason I ask this is you probably relate to this. When I entered into corporate, there was almost like there's a way of behaving if you want that corner office. Yeah.
Template.
That's it. Talk to us about that. How has that evolved, and why is it important to be your authentic self within the corporate environment?
I think, Sarah, it is absolutely critical. And I look at my team, which are young up-and-coming leaders, and I really encourage that diversity with them. And these are life skills. This diversity comes with life skills. But I wish there was a way that we could sit down with universities, with business schools, and create modules that would say that in diversity comes ideas. In diversity we solve problems. Let's not get stuck in this stereotypical way of thinking, in this template. If you want the corner office, you need to do A, B, and C. I think and my advice to young up and coming executives is, why do you want the corner office?
Yeah.
You can do so much more than sitting in a corner office and conforming to a pattern and a certain thought process. By bringing who you are, your skills, your thought processes, your imagination, the way that you see the world. You know, last night when I was cycling, I was watching a fascinating true story, a Zambian story, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind.
Yes.
In a nutshell, have you seen it? Do you know about the story?
Please tell
me. This is a typical little tiny village in so many of the African countries, struggling. You know, there's poverty. There's not money for schooling. There's this one bright kid who has got such an insatiable need for knowledge, and he gets kicked out of school because there's no school fees, but he reads a book about how to use energy. And after big drama with his family, his father eventually allows him to saw up the bicycle, and through bits and pieces and the community coming together, they build a makeshift windmill and they start harnessing the wind for energy, and they save the village. And when I'd finished watching the story, I was thinking to myself, but that is the critical thinking skills that our youngsters, our school kids, our young leaders need to know. Be bold. Put that idea forward and keep putting that idea forward. Keep pushing that idea, because that idea might not give you the corner office. Yes. But it will give you so much more.
Absolutely.
And so our young leaders must bring their ideas. They must bring their diversity. They must bring their thought process. They must bring who they are, the essence of them, their true self. And it comes back to what you asked me 2 or 3 questions ago. It's owning your story and bringing that rich context, and yeah, I'm going into story speak, but bringing that context, bringing that you into the workplace and literally being unapologetic for who you are and your thought processes. Because let's face it, corporate needs to evolve as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Otherwise, we are going to be stuck in a rut, in thought processes that were maybe good 10 or 20 years ago. But the world has changed. Just look what COVID has done and the innovation that COVID is bringing. Unfortunately, it's bringing innovation, but it's also highlighting this massive digital divide that exists in the world.
Absolutely. I will touch on that a little bit later. So before we go on to a break, there is something. So we've looked at Cindy, the daughter, where your genesis, if I may call it that. We've looked at the corporate world a little bit. We've talked a little bit about the artistic Cindy. I know you are an animal lover. I mean, that's one thing. I remember you calling me, unfortunately, when you lost your dog recently. And some of the work that you do all the time, you know, where does this come from, and why is it important that we look at animals differently, we look after them, for you, from your perspective?
All right, Sarah, and I'm glad you're asking this, because this is also so part and parcel of who I am. And the love for animals comes from my dad. He taught me from a very, very young age the way a person, the way a man treats an animal is the true essence of that individual.
Okay.
And from a tiny, tiny, tiny age. And as I grew older, I asked him, explain to me, what do you mean? Because I grew up in a home where there's been cats, dogs, there's been a zoo. And there's just this massive outpouring of love for animals. And my dad said to me, you know, Cindy, animals are sentient beings. They understand. They get excited. They're happy. They're sad. They are capable of experiencing emotions as you and I do. And that was like, I think I was about 7 or 8, was this massive light bulb moment. Just went on, and I realized, but it's not just a dog. It's not just an animal. And as I grew older and I started reading God's word more, you go right back to Genesis, and that is an instruction from God to us that we will take care of the animals and of the planet, for that matter. They are under our stewardship. I've never had my own children. I've always only had 4-legged or birdie animals. But I treat them like my children because they have emotions. They're not just something that you leave out there in the cold. Or because if you are not capable of being able to love and care for an animal, how on earth are you going to internalize those emotions and display that towards humans? Now, this is quite a controversial topic, because there's many people who think that there's this distinction between people and animals. Yes, there is. God created us all different. But the way that we treat animals says a lot about who we are as individuals.
Absolutely. It does. Thank you so much for those insights. And the listeners and viewers, you can tell that this is a diverse kind of person within Cindy. We've looked at Cindy, the daughter, Cindy from an orphanage during her beginnings. Cindy, the daughter, talks about her mother, her loving father, whose birthday was yesterday, I believe, and yours being today. She talks about Cindy, the artist, the filmmaker, Cindy, the executive, Cindy, the hiker, the cyclist. We're getting there. The list is quite long, but thank you for that. Let's give a little bit of a break and listen to our sponsors who make this podcast possible.
Because It's There with Saray Khumalo is proudly sponsored by Vuma.
Right. Let's go to you again. Cindy, the survivor, you went through cancer the first time, and I want to look at that and get to a point. I'm sure when you are told, you go through, certain emotions, and you get to a point where you say, you know what, I am a survivor, and you start fighting back. What was that moment like? What process did you go through to get to a point where you say, I am a survivor and I am fighting back? Was it always like that? Or there was a specific point through this journey that you decided what route you're going to take in fighting back?
Sarah, that's very interesting, because I think people respond to news like that in different ways. The day that I went for the mammography or the mammogram, I had a feeling that something was wrong. But one says, it's nothing. And it started becoming a reality when we had 2 emergency biopsies. And I think it started dawning for me that this is something a little bit more serious than what I was anticipating when I had a little sticker on my my sonar and my x-rays or mammogram plates. And 3 days later, they always say no news is good news. And 3 days after, and now I know why. 3 days after the mammogram and the biopsies, the doctor's room, my gynecologist phoned me and he said to me, please, can you come in? And then I still didn't quite want to believe it, but I knew that if the doctor phones you to discuss results with you, then, you know, everything is not hunky-dory. There must be a problem somewhere. And I sat in front of him and he was absolutely mortified. And he said to me, you know, I have to give you a cancer diagnosis. And I sat there and you hear the words, cancer diagnosis, but it somehow doesn't sink in. And when I was driving home, I was living in Pretoria at that point in time, it started to dawn on me, but I've been diagnosed with a disease that could potentially kill me. And I did have a good cry on my way home because I was by myself in the car. I wasn't sure now what do I do? What does this journey look like from here? You know, what is going to happen? Am I going to survive this? Is my hair going to fall out? Am I going to be sick? Am I going to be the same person? And all of these questions started going through my mind, and I realized that I won't know until I've got all the facts. So that is where, when I become very stressed, I become very factual. Give me all the facts. Don't whitewash stuff. I want to know what I'm dealing with. I need to understand the treatment, the protocols, so that I can make a decision, so that I can plot my path from there. And it was actually today on my birthday, 7 years ago, when I saw the oncologist the first time. I'd gone through a bilateral mastectomy at that point in time. I had to heal, and then we could start the treatment protocol. And I remember sitting in his office in Pretoria, and he said to me, "You're young." I was only 47 at that point in time. And he said to me, "You've got early stage 2 breast cancer, which means it started to spread into my lymph nodes." He said, "But there is no reason why you can't survive this." He said, "I'm telling you, chemo medicine will do 50%. The other 50% is up to you." And I left the oncology room and I was thinking, he's right. I can go through the treatment, but if I don't make the decision that I am going to survive this, because there is so much that I still want to do and achieve and make a difference and travel and go out on adventures, I realized that the choice is mine and mine alone. And I came home and I made some coffee and I said to myself, "My girl," and this is, if you've read my book, this is every now and again, I've been in this where I've got to make a choice. Do I fight or do I flight? And this was just, once again, a decision that I made. Fight. I'm not going to fight this. I am going to beat this. I am going to survive this. And once I get through this journey, I will make sure that I can then pass on that baton of hope to somebody else. And it's very difficult for me to reach out to people and ask for help. But this time I realized I can't fight this journey on my own. I need my friends. I need my family, because it's a horrible disease and you can't go through this on your own. You need people. So to be a survivor is a choice. When you are fighting for your life, there's something that happens. I don't know if it's a chemical reaction in your brain. I'm not a doctor, but something switched in my mind. And I said, I've survived so much in my life that a cancer diagnosis is not going to stop me. It's not going to steal my life, my joy from me.
That is interesting. So what you've recounted is your initial diagnosis with breast cancer, and you recently had a skin cancer diagnosis. Did you go through the same process? Did you find it easier? Was it a lengthy process? How did you go through this one? Was it, take us through that.
You know, Sarah, I think you can speak to anybody that's been through cancer. The one thing cancer teaches you is to be very in touch with your body. It's not from a place of fear, it's from a place of knowledge that if there's a lump or a bump or something that's not right, you don't leave it. You have it seen to, and that's not being a hypochondriac. You have it seen to, you go and seek the medical opinion. I made an appointment. I had a bump on my nose that wouldn't go away. At first, I thought it was just a little pimple, but it didn't want to heal properly. And I eventually just got a sense that I was by no means thinking that this was a cancerous tumor. Just let me go to a dermatologist. I've never been to a dermatologist. I am in my 50s. You know, I am fair-skinned. I've got freckles. I've had a lot of sun exposure in my life. Let me just go and check this out. And I went to go and see her. And at the first sort of diagnosis, she said to me, I've got to do a biopsy. And that for that moment, I had that same, it just triggered, you know, you hear the word biopsy, and I won't say automatically, but you've got to go and fetch your thought process and say, come back. You haven't got all the facts. The long and the short of the story was, it was skin cancer. It was a basal cell carcinoma, which they had to cut out, and then they did a sort of skin flap reconstruction on my nose. There was the initial fear. I had to work very hard to go and fetch it and say, you're not going to run, because nobody that has survived cancer wants to hear, oh, you've just had, you've got a flare up of whether it's skin cancer, and unfortunately there are some skin cancers that are life-threatening. This was a non-life-threatening, but there was a certain treatment protocol. I had to go back into hospital for more surgery, more disfiguration, yet another scar to a long list of scars that I have, you know, on my body. But I also said, whatever the treatment protocol is, we're going to get through this. And what am I going to learn? What additional lessons am I learning from this experience? And if I've learned it, how do I share it? Because I firmly believe that if you are given life experiences, and it is incumbent on you to share the wisdom, to share the knowledge. And it wasn't easy. And every now and again, I think to myself, sure, you know, I've got to be so careful now when I'm out in the sun. And actually, I was at my chiro last week because I'm battling a bit with my shoulder. And she highlighted something to me that I didn't think of. And she said to me, okay, Cindy, she said to me, when last have you been on your bicycle? I'm not speaking about on your trainer inside or in the gym. When last have you been out in the sun on your bike? And I couldn't answer. And she said to me, I think what's happening as well is you've got a fear of the sun.
Oh, wow.
And it was only when my chiro started joining the dots for me, and I realized, but she's right. And last Friday night, I loaded my car, my bike into the back of the car. And when the alarm went off on Saturday morning, I thought, no, I'm not going cycling. I'll rather just stick to my garage. So I had to get through that barrier as well. because I was replaying things in my mind, because unfortunately sometimes we also shut things down, or I did, because I said, this is no big a deal. But if I now replay some of the things, I realized, but there was still a bit of anxiety in me, because the surgeon said to me, you are so fair-skinned, you've had a lot of sun damage in your life. There is a possibility that you could have basal cell carcinoma again. And that kind of just, I think, threw my mind for a loop. But I didn't say anything. I hid it. And it was only when my chiro said to me, you've got to get out into the sun. Yes, you've got to. Yes, I have been on the odd hikes, but you've seen me. It's been a yay big hat, sunglasses, the buff under the nose, factor 100 all over. And I realized she was right. And then I thought to myself, okay, now what do I do with this sort of piece of useless information, which is not so useless? And then I realized, okay, if I'm going to overcome this fear of the sun, I need to make certain adjustments. I need to have a look at my cycling attire. So what do I do with this? Am I going to continue being scared of Mr. Sun? Or am I now going to step back and say, how do I solve for this? And so much so that I actually did a little bit of research, and I found an artisan cycling company in a textile company in Pretoria. I reached out to them. I said to them, I want to develop a prototype, lightweight, like our material for our cycling shirts, but long sleeves with a higher collar and long legs, but lightweight, not summer, not winter cycling clothes, but lightweight summer clothes that has a UPF rating of 50 plus, because I refuse to believe that I'm the only cyclist out there that's been diagnosed with some form of skin cancer. And I sent the mail off to this company. Unfortunately, I can't disclose, because we're actually now going to go into a sort of partnership in developing this line. I didn't hear anything immediately, but about 2 hours later, they phoned me and they said to me, can you come through on Friday? I was there yesterday, and they are designing a prototype long sleeves for me, and also a type of skull cap with a visor. And what we then want to do is take it to cancer and get their seal of approval. And that opens up a range for other cyclists out there to cycle in the sun, still have lightweight clothes on, but be protected.
Yeah. I'm just cracking myself, because you didn't need your chiropractor to tell you that you're afraid of the sun. I could have told you that for free, my friend. You're like buffed up.
I know. The last time we went for our hike, you took one look at me and you said to me, and all of this? And I said, no, Sarah, I've got to protect myself against the sun. So yes, I can imagine I'm cracking you up. Maybe I could have saved $500 by seeing my chiro and just going to you for advice. But coming back to the original question of being a survivor doesn't mean that you survive everything all the time. I think it's a mindset that you get confronted with something and allow yourself those emotions, because there's also something like toxic positivity, where you are so positive that you are actually not acknowledging that there is something that you need to deal with. And I think with my skin cancer, I was maybe a little bit toxically positive. And I needed my chiro to slap me and say, get with the program. But once she said it, the penny dropped, and I realized, okay, stop this nonsense. Yeah. And that survivor instinct. Okay, so what do I do with this information, and how do I solve for this?
Absolutely. So Cindy, that is amazing. And I found it entertaining. Actually, I was like, okay, I know that. but I love the fact that you look at the problem and say, how can I solve it? Not just for me, but for other people. I
Yes.
absolutely appreciate that about you. So you talked about not being, too quick to seek help, but your first diagnosis got you to say, how can I reach out to my friends? How can I reach out to my family? So I want to take you back to the shapers in your life, right? Who have been the key shapers, or one shaper, or three, it doesn't really matter, that have guided you on your road to success when you are in the valleys and when you are at the top of your world, your game, or whatever the case may be? How did you come into contact with them, and what role have they played and continue to play in your life?
Okay, the first most important Sherpa in my life is God. But now if we bring it back into people, is my mom and my dad were my first two Sherpas, because they gave me a new life, a new beginning, and shaped me into, and then there were different people in my life. Some carried just part of the load up to a certain level, and then there were others that went all the way to the top. And one of those Sherpas is you as well.
Thank you.
And the reason why I say that is I've often looked at you, and we've been through a couple of adventures and not so nice adventures together. And whenever you've been through something that has sent my emotions into to orbit, I realize, okay, I need, as far as I can be, carry some of Sarah's load, and you've done the same for me. So you are one of my Sherpas, and you will continue to be. I sometimes just look, I get a lot of inspiration from you. My middle brother in Durban is one of my Sherpas. He, as a child, I was being bullied, and I was feeling particularly down. I was battling with my eyes, and then started wearing glasses, and he just helped me, get over that and cross that bridge. When I was going through and I've got two other Sherpas in my life. That is my friend Julie and my friend Sanya, who have been with me throughout my life. They're not just my Sherpas, they're my yaks as well. Because in a way, sometimes they are in the background. They're not ahead of me carrying certain things. They are very often in the background, and I hear the clanging bell, but they've got the rest of my baggage. And I think it's important to realize that we will always have a key team, key Sherpas, and people will come and go because they can help you overcome something, or they can shape a thought pattern, and they're not always meant or designed to be there forever. And I think it's also having the insight to realize when somebody is in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And the same for the Sherpas. I mean, you look, and the Sherpas are very often, and you've often said that, are actually the heroes.
Yeah.
And if I look at all the Sherpas in my life, they are actually the heroes, because if it wasn't for my mom and my dad that adopted me, I wouldn't be where I am today. I might be somewhere completely different. If it wasn't for my friends, my family, for you, things might have looked completely different. So we don't always honor the Sherpas in our lives, those who help us carry the load. And very often it's that last, just as you get to your summit, that they step back and they say, there you go. And I get emotional when I talk about that because, yes, that last couple of steps is your own steps.
Yes.
But there's an entire team that helped you to get, I'm getting very emotional, to that point where you can take those last couple of steps, and whether, like you stood on top of the world, or in my case, I've just been to the roof of Africa, beg your pardon, or publishing a book, it doesn't matter. It is an entire skill set. It is an entire team that gets you to that point where you can take, where you've got the confidence to take that last couple of steps and say, right, here I am. I just want to grab a tissue.
I love that. I've taken a lot of your time, but I still want to hear more. We have
you
touched on this book, this lovely book, Life is by Numbers. I know, Cindy, before you even got cancer, thought you would ever get cancer, you were living a life of service. You were raising money for Pink Drive. You were cycling 947 for Pink Drive and other organizations. And I know, like me, you're very passionate about literacy and education. Where does this life of service come from? Why is it so important to have a life of service? Ubuntu is quite core to what you do every day. I know that for a fact. Why is it important, and what role has it played in your life?
Sure, Sarah, that's a bit of a loaded question. Do we have another hour? I think, once again, coming back to the previous question of Sherpa and a life of service, that example I got from my dad. My dad, whether he stood in service of us as a family, or whether he stood in service of his own employees that he had, he taught me that it's not just about you. Okay, what makes you fruitful is what you give. What do you bring to the table? What is that ingredient? And he said, if you serve, and that doesn't mean you're a doormat, but if you serve and you give time and you do it with a joyful heart, but your motivation for standing in service is always for the greater good of somebody else or something else. And he always said to me, my girl, there's no place for ego. So and it's easy, you know, when you excel in certain things, or you become, it doesn't matter whether the recognition is big or whether the recognition is small, there's always that possibility that your ego can get in the way. And that's why to me, a life of service it's what fuels me. It makes me happy to be able to contribute, not necessarily help, to contribute to the well-being of other people. It's just the way I think I was put together. And I think the other great example is, if you look at Jesus, he lived a life of service.
Absolutely.
I've got my dad and God here, and to me it's pretty simple. And I often get into a lot of debates with people. To me, it's pretty simple to live a life of service. It's what I enjoy. It's what I love. It's who I am. It's core to. If you had to tell me, Cindy, you can't do things for somebody else, I think I'll just shrivel up and die.
Wow.
Because that is who I am.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely. Cindy, about life is not paint by numbers. What are the key lessons that you see people picking up from your book? Where can they get it if they need to get a copy for themselves? And I know that there are charities that are benefiting from some of the proceeds. Can you tell us a little bit more about life is not paint by numbers?
Sarah, I think the key lessons, there's actually one chapter that is dedicated to nuggets of wisdom in there. But I think the key lesson, the key undertone of the book is, number one, be bold, be brave, step out, and become who you were meant to be, who you were designed to be. Be your authentic self. Doesn't matter what it looks like. We can't all be a Van Gogh. Some of us are Picassos, some of us are Monets, some of us are Clarots. It doesn't matter. But be you. Be authentically you. And be true to yourself. And accept what life throws at you. But make a choice. Make a choice if you are going to stagnate and wallow in the fact that there's no out, or this mountain is unclimbable. There is always a route out. Sometimes we've got to adjust our focus, take a step back and say, I can do this. Absolutely. And for that, you need to be bold. You need courage. You need help from your friends. But you must have the will to want to step out and be bold and be brave. Courage is not something that you can go and buy off a shelf. Courage is something that is within you. And sometimes life has to really knock you down before you can reach into self and scoop out that courage and then use that courage going forward. So the book can be bought either from Takealot, and all the, I think about 50% of the proceeds on Takealot go to Volley's Animal Shelter, which is an animal shelter in Pretoria. If you order the book on Amazon, 50% of the proceeds there will go to Pink Drive, and that will help the marginalized members of our community who do not have medical insurance to be able to go for mammograms, for PSA tests in the case of the guys, and cervical screens. And then there's another channel, smashwords.com, which goes for the Lighthouse Baby Shelter in Johannesburg, an orphanage that takes in abandoned babies or abandoned children for that matter. They've actually expanded their focus. So whichever one of these platforms, a big percentage of that will go to that charity to enable them to continue to making the difference in the lives of people and animals.
Love it. So my last question, describe your best challenge or your best failure, however you want to position it, and how it propelled you forward?
Describe my best, sorry, Siri, you broke up there.
Describe your best failure or challenge and how it propelled you forward.
Sarah, there's been so many failures. My best failure. Oh, goodness gracious.
As long as it was failing forward, that's okay.
I think sure. They've, somebody, I've got to take a step back. Somebody said to me, Cindy, everything that you touch turns into gold. And I said, no, my friend, I've had many failures. I had a failed marriage. I had a failed financial, I had to go through a voluntary surrender of my estate, and I considered that a financial failure. I desperately wanted to cycle from Cairo to Cape Town 2 years ago, and either the messaging wasn't correct and I couldn't raise all the money. Cut a long story, that felt like a failure because I so desperately wanted to do something, and it just, little did I know that COVID would strike in 2020. So there've been a number of epic failures in my life. But what I've learned, and I actually also do mention it in the book, I've learned to fail forward. So I think now I autocorrect a lot quicker than what I did way back then. And I think once again, that is what resilience and wisdom and input from friends and family have meant to me is, okay, right, this bombed out completely, it failed. So either you can go back and attempt it again, but then you've got to replan, you've got to rethink, you've got to readjust. So failing forward means, okay, it's okay to fail. Thomas Edison didn't create the light bulb at the first attempt. Some of our greatest inventions did not happen, on the first attempt. It was failing, because very often in our failure, we learn the lesson and the wisdom, and that gives us the ability to say, take a step back, take a step to the left, take a step to the right, rethink this, consult with people, and come up with a new plan. And I think all the failures that I've had in my life has taught me to say it's okay to fail. It doesn't make you a lesser person. But take a step back. Consult with people if you're not able to solve for it yourself, and then work with that. And then stick to the plan. Don't deviate and go off track again, because then you're going to fail again.
There was the key. Stick to the plan. This was amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Cindy. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in for another amazing episode of Because It's There. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I can't believe an hour has gone by.
It has indeed. It has. Thank you, everybody. And tune in next time. That was Cindy Van Wyk on Because It's There.